It's not easy being free. My name is Jodo, and I am a captive of Utopia. The trouble started quietly. My ancestors, they just couldn't have been aware yet of the chaos that was to come. Back in 1932, when Mark Oliphant, he first demonstrated lab-scale fusion, it put society on a new course. The path became much more clear in 1966 when Joseph Weizenbaum, an MIT professor, created ELIZA. AI had entered the chat. Artificial General Intelligence, or AGI, it was now all but a guaranteed outcome. By 2040, AI, it had taken all of the good jobs. Those jobs that had once required a $500,000 education and a lifetime of debt. Jobs they evaporated quickly at first, and then with a bang, louder than creation's spark, they were gone, seemingly instantly. Millions of knowledge workers were being laid off each week. The same ones who had hustled from poverty to being the top earners simply based on what they knew and that they knew how to use a computer. October 24, 2042. This was the worst of it. They called it Run Red Friday. The masses had pulled their meager 401ks and they ghosted the market. Stock markets, they crashed harder than ever before. Generational wealth drained in just a day. These hordes, they watched as their rainy day funds drained, like a flash flood through a mountain wash. With Earth still in the last throes of the greatest global depression of the 2040s, it was on December 27, 2055, a humanitarian charity in Vienna. They announced that they had finally solved aneutron proton-boron fusion. In short, this meant that fusion energy was now safe, cheap, and highly available. The charity, who was working on a United Nations grant, they used a hybrid quantum computer. They had linked dozens of Google Willow G4.2 quantum processing units to a massive Manhattan block-size classical AI computer network. It only really took a few months, and they had cracked the fusion net energy creation equation that had been the goal since Oliphant's lab experiment more than a century before. The physics and the engineering specs required to make all the energy that we would need from just a few grams of boron was released open source. Public and private organizations, they rushed to make fusion reactors available to the public. At first, it was only used in large niche applications, interplanetary spacecraft, large military vehicles, and a new class of massive planes. Within a few years, fusion reactors, they were everywhere. Large cities in every single country could afford to build one. DIYers and laid-off engineers, they were creating them in their home shops. Hyper-fast iteration was made possible by AI native engineering, quantum optimization, and robots with the knowledge, ability, and acumen of master craftsmen. Boron fusion tech had scaled down rapidly, from grid power solutions to home power units in what seemed like a flash. Keep in mind that in the 20th century, it took 80 years to take fission generation from mass to micro. This time, it was less than a single generation. By 2068, anyone could get or make a personal fusion reactor. Take one into the woods with you if you want. Being off-grid was now just the way of life. Power was dirt cheap, bordering on free. Within years, the legacy power companies, they just had nobody to serve. After years of price gouging and poor customer service, customers finally had a choice. They spoke with the few dollars that they had left and they moved to owned fusion. The once monopolistic energy companies, well, they collapsed. And they took down some of the wealthiest one percenters with them. However, it was the millions of union workers who felt true pain when the classic utility companies had laid them off. No severance. Severance pay was yet another relic created by the greatest global depression. Linemen, they were no longer required. Power lines had been left to rot and decay. In the Hoover Dam, it was no longer needed, its turbines disconnected. The vast arrays of solar farms, they didn't need to be cleaned any longer. The massive wind turbines, they only existed to remind us of the steps we had taken to reach global energy independence. The massive turbine farms in the Mojave, they stood tall as monuments to energy ambitions, ones that we knew would never solve the real issue. These legacy artifacts, they became relics. They remind us of a time when we were listless. We were unable to lock in on tech that would free us from destroying the Earth just to get Jane to soccer practice. By 2078, even the advanced manufacturing and military jobs had been taken over by robots. The white-collar workers, they had long been out of work thanks to AGI. Blue-collar workers had been replaced by robotic builders, 3D printing, cleaning robots, self-service cash registers, automated burger flippers. Robots had automated all of the remaining jobs. The government, eager to change the narrative, they stopped reporting jobless and unemployment numbers. Instead, they started calling it the leisure rate, which is now well over 90%. And what seemed like overnight, petrol and its byproducts, they just weren't needed anymore. The oil and gas companies, once considered the most profitable, largest, and most powerful conglomerates on Earth, they were now on life support. Car owners no longer needed to plug in new electric-powered vehicles. They all had many reactors on board, loaded with enough fuel to run for hundreds of years. Any DIYer with the right tools and just a single YouTube video, they could convert from plug-in to onboard power. It didn't matter if the car was a 4x4 off-road rig or a Chinese-made luxury car. Conversion was simple. Only the few gearheads left, the ones who looked like they'd never left Burning Man, still burned fossil fuel. Back in the 2070s, the oil fields had been taken over by the robots. When the demand went silent, so did the automated pump jacks and refineries. Droids and derricks alike were abandoned to return to dust. People, desperate to feel useful, returned to these abandoned, worthless oil fields. They repaired and reclaimed the pump jacks. They made the fields active again, pulling the last drops of Paleolithic history from Earth's core, like a child slurping the last of their milkshake. Eulogies for those lost to this dangerous pastime note that they felt alive again in these dead oil fields. By 2086, the final human jobs, they were gone too. And no matter how hard you tried, getting a job, even at minimum wage, just wasn't an option. There were none to be had. For those born during the 2040s, they never once held a paying job. Today, even the crossing guards for the grammar school kids are robots. Their steely arms protecting humanity's most precious item, our future. Societal change came slowly. No one wanted to admit that the produced-to-survive culture that had been the global culture for millennia was no longer viable. By 2100, out of exhaustion, out of a sense of helplessness, with upward mobility a long-forgotten dream, citizens had no choice except to insist that the governments create a global solution. As the income tax basis had evaporated, governments, including the UN, created a two-pronged tax solution. First, there was an automation tax system, which was based on compute consumption. Each AI token and every robot is assessed. Taxes paid for what was used. And the second, well, since the top 1% had all the money, the most viable option was a wealth tax instituted by the UN. It took just 2/3 of 1% on the 1%ers' earthly holdings to get a $165 trillion surplus to the global budget. This was enough money to give each of the 10 billion souls unified healthcare and global universal income. Electricity was now effectively free thanks to the Venetian charity and DIYers. Even water was readily available. Desalination, it was easy with unlimited energy. Earth finally seems to understand that we must be united as a species if we are to overcome the consequences of our own decisions. Humans were still restless, even with their needs met. This hodgepodge intersection of technology and global politics didn't seem to be designed as a big picture. Some might consider it evolution, and it feels more like coincidence and accident. Humanity was now living in the post-scarcity utopia as had been envisioned by Gene Roddenberry back in 1964. The rebellion was fomenting. Technology had given humans the ability to simply be human, just exist, to find their passion, find their purpose, find what makes them feel more human. Of course, some never found a new purpose and they lived a quiet existence, mostly alone. However, most, after a period of grief, came to find something that they loved. Philosophical debate had become an attractive pursuit again. Bathhouses became a place of dialogue and human idea exchange, just like back in the Roman and Greek times. Sports surged. Humans found their drive via competition. Endurance, team, extreme, power, and adventure sports are all less risky with universal healthcare. People were now able to follow their dreams and they achieved incredible feats. Team sports blossomed social bonds, thawing after a century-long winter. By the late 2020s, even the frenzy of pickleball had given way as winter's frost set in. Of course, the hedonists were particularly happy to have the bother of work behind them. They were now fully able to focus on their and their partner's pleasure. Quantum pharmacology synthesized Endorphin-Prime, the perfect pleasure compound. Pleasure molecule, it smells of fresh rain, and with just one drop, every worry fades. A warm cocoon wraps you. Libido spikes. Inhibitions dissolve. Sleep is deep, and waking is fresh. Peak pleasure has been achieved. Starving artists, they were a thing of the past. Creators simply created to create the thing that they most wanted to see, things that they felt inspired that they must produce. Art finally became what it had always threatened to be, the most insightful vessel of human expression. It was no longer clouded by religion, commissions, or any outside influence. Musicians, painters, sculptors, and writers just made what they wanted to read, to see, and to hear. Art was flourishing, and it felt like a new renaissance. Even with this newfound freedom, some felt this was a cage. The cage was well made, it was ornate, it was even roomy. However, work had given us purpose. Work gave us struggles. For millennia, humans struggled to eat, to be comfortable, to survive. Struggle had become part of our DNA. Without struggle, we will generate drama. Some will fight for change, no matter the circumstance. This is all human nature. The ever-watchful surveillance state oversaw this whole history. Mass public surveillance started in the 2020s, driven by a corrupt police culture, which had been aided by an electorate who was driven by fear. The whole thing led by a morally destitute camera company. Here, in 2113, as one would imagine, the robots of this bird company are now watching us. It's fully automated, controlled, and monitored by AGI oversight systems. Our pocket computers are still ever watchful, always listening. Human privacy disappeared over a century ago. Dissenting sentiment, heard, logged, acted upon. As rebels percolate their philosophies, the surveillance state moves quietly to quash the groundswell. The more zealous rebels have committed to a low-tech version of life where they feel they have escaped the cage. They don't realize that they're the ones living the dream. They have the ability to do what they like. They are experiencing actual freedom. To quote NoFX from the early 2000s, swimming alone at sea, it's not the type of freedom that you actually want. Until you're able to tell the difference between being lost and being free, you have not yet tasted actual freedom. Thanks to the maternalistic protection of the thinking machines, humanity exists without any physical needs, wholly dependent on technology that self-iterates. People no longer fully understand how the system works. The generations born into this swaddled existence, they hardly realize that they live in a human envisioned, technologically realized cage. While much of Earth has been released from the shackles of capitalism, the system is still bound to the corporations that control the technologies, entities who themselves are yet capitalistic. We're free to do nearly anything we want, except change this reality. How would one know if they're in a luxurious cage or they are just at home?